could be for the good. There's a lot of good things coming out of this technology, but the very rapidity of it is going to be disruptive. That's not necessarily a fearful thing, but it is something where we need to be prepared and think about it. And all of us collectively are in this soup.
Welcome to Your Creative Mind. I'm Izolda Trachtenberg, and this podcast is all about using your innate creativity and mindfulness to build a life you love. Whether it's through writing, music, dance, theater, or any creative pursuit, we'll explore how to tap into your unique potential to transform your work, relationships, and daily life. Through inspiring conversations with world-changing artists, entrepreneurs, and innovators, or actionable insights in my solo episodes, you'll learn how to focus your energy, ignite your creativity, and bring more joy and purpose to everything you do. Hey there, and welcome to the Your Creative Mind podcast. I'm your host, Izolda Trachtenberg. Super grateful that you've taken the time to listen. And I have a question for you. What if the future isn't something we shape, but something that shapes us? Today's guest, astrophysicist J. Craig Wheeler, has spent his career studying the universe, but now he's turning his attention to something almost as vast and unpredictable: the accelerating power of AI, genetic engineering, and space exploration. Are we on the brink of breakthroughs that will elevate humanity, or are we speeding toward a future where technology outpaces our control? J. Craig isn't here to spark fear. He's here to arm us with knowledge, and he's going to break down what's happening, what's coming, and what it all means for you. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and make informed choices in this rapidly changing world, you're not going to want to miss this conversation. And I'd love to introduce you to J. Craig Wheeler. Craig, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I am. First of all, I read your book, The Path to Singularity, and as I mentioned to you right before we started recording, it both fascinated and terrified me. So we have a lot to talk about.
Me too, at some level. Yeah, the intent was not to terrify, but boy, the reality is kind of what it is.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me because we are. I feel like we're at a precipice of some sort, because things could go any number of different ways regarding and regardless everything: technology, politics, religion, the state of the world, all of this stuff.
Yep.
But we're focusing in on this one facet. And I guess the main question, and the first question I have for you is, if you had to distill your message in the book and also what you're trying to get to everybody about the future of tech into one powerful sentence, what would it be?
Yeah, I think that we are about to see a change in the human social condition, that technology has grown forever, exponentially. Actually, I make the argument in the book. We survived things like the Industrial Revolution by adjusting. It was disruptive. But I think we're coming to a point where technology is changing so fast, and will, if not now, the next year after that, that individuals and societies will not be able to keep up. And that will be a brand new phase in human existence. So that's a principal argument of the book about the exponential growth and the implication of the exponential growth of all sorts of technologies, not just AI.
Yikes. Okay, so
it was a long sentence.
No.
That's the spirit.
That's a perfect length for what you were saying. There was a lot to say. So I've heard this, that technology sort of grows or doubles itself or whatever every 18 months, et cetera, et cetera. And you're saying that this is accelerating and it's growing exponentially. Talk to me like I'm 5 and explain, if you would, what does that mean as opposed to geometric growth? What does exponential growth of technology, of AI, of all these various things in facets of the way our society lives, what does it mean?
Yeah, I've actually spent some time thinking about that as I was teaching about it and trying to write the book of why is that happening? And so here is my thought on that the more you know, the more you can do. It is kind of like compound interest in the bank. It doesn't depend on putting in a dollar and then the next day putting in a dollar and the next day putting in a dollar so that it grows in a linear fashion with time. It builds on itself like compound interest. And I think, human knowledge collectively does that. The more we know collectively, the more we can do. And it turns out if you try to take that statement and put it in mathematical terms, the mathematical solution is an exponential growth. So I don't claim that it's exactly exponential, but the fact that the more you know, the more you can do, points in the direction of something like exponential growth. And so that's what we're dealing with. It could be faster, it could be a little slower, but it's if it anything like that, then it's growing faster and faster and faster. And that's going to eventually keep up with us and change the whole character of social existence, I think, to make it dramatic. Could be for the good. There's a lot of good things coming out of this technology, but the very rapidity of it is going to be disruptive. I think that's not necessarily a fearful thing, but it is something where we need to be prepared and think about it. And all of us collectively are in this soup. And that's kind of what the book was about. It's a, sort of a primer on how you think about these things and what's happening now. And, the book's been out for 2 months. It's already outmoded at some level because it's in this same exponential trap. So,
Okay. All right. I okay. So I'm sitting here and I'm going, okay. So the more you do, the more you can do, the more you know, the more you want to know. And that's something that sort of makes me go, huh, okay. Traditionally, my thought on this has been that for going back to AI, once AI can do certain jobs, for example, and maybe we're there, maybe we're not. But once AI can do certain jobs, once we're in a situation where that can happen, doesn't that free humans up to imagine the next step? Or are we at some point going to be so far outpaced by what AI can do that we're not going to be able to control how it grows?
well, I think that is one of the concerns. And I didn't invent that. And maybe it can be controlled. I think we don't know. We need to develop a mental framework of thinking about it and trying to control it at some level. But that is one of the concerns that the our machines, AI, will run away because they will build on this exponential growth. And if they come to a point where they really can get to the level of sort of the capacity of a human, which is artificial general intelligence, the way it's defined, or the capacity of all humans collectively, which might happen shortly thereafter. So artificial superior intelligence or conscious machines or that phase, which is what the singularity is. If machines develop a consciousness of some kind so they can control themselves. But then, they don't work at the biological speeds of our brains. They work at the electronic, nearly the speed of light of machinery and silicon chips and whatnot. So they can blast, once they pass the human capacity, they can blast beyond that very rapidly. And that's the concern. Do we somehow try to stop short of the singularity? Do we partner with the AI in some way that's under conversation, but not clear how that works? I mean, we've got AIs, we don't really know what's happening in that black box. They hallucinate. I recently discovered they deliberately lie and deceive and cheat. That's a sobering thing.
Really?
So, we could pursue that a bit if you want to, but yeah,
Yes, please. Well, okay. So I'm gonna sort of take a slight left turn here and talk
please go
about
ahead.
science fiction for a second.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, yeah,
So,
yeah,
okay.
important ingredient. Absolutely.
Yes. So, on August 29th, 1997, and I'm sure you're familiar with the date, in the Terminator franchise was when the machines, uh, Skynet became self-aware, right? At 2:14 a.m. Eastern time, August 29th, 1997. And then
Got it.
within
Got it.
seconds went, and humans are superfluous on Earth. Let's get rid of all of them. So so that's a way. In the Big Bang Theory, Sheldon Cooper couldn't wait for the singularity where he could be part of a robotic organism. Star Trek, the first initial movie, we saw human and machine combined. So there has been this fascination with this next step for some time. A-
Absolutely.
And so I would love it if you would talk about a science fiction's role in this, but also how that has informed people's curiosity to make that happen at some point.
Yeah, I think both of those things are true. Make the argument in the book, or at least I've made it afterwards thinking about it, that it is important to do strategic speculation. That is, you have to try to imagine, so going beyond the boundaries of where we know, what might happen in order to begin to think about what sort of guidelines and regulations we might put into effect. And science fiction is absolutely part of that, where somebody just lets their imagination go. Where might that be going? But that's laying out the map of where things might occur, and then we can think about, well, that's okay, or I don't want to go there, thank you very much, and collectively try to come to some decisions. Right? I think science fiction plays an absolutely critical role, and the three things you just mentioned right now are, part of this collective consciousness of raising conscious raising consciousness of the issues. And I think that's really very important. So they tend to be a little on the dystopic side, but I think that's appropriate too. You want to try to imagine a dystopia we might stumble into of unintended consequences.
Mm.
If you don't imagine them, you're certainly not going to try to sit down with some policymaker and say, let's try to avoid that. Not going to be easy. It's not, there's so many things going on that to know where to start is already a mind-bending thing. But it starts by having conversations like this, for which I appreciate the invitation.
I, well, you're absolutely welcome. This topic fascinates me, as you might be able to tell, since I'm a ginormous science fiction dork.
Fine.
But,
Wonderful.
but
I've written a couple of science fiction novels, actually.
excellent, excellent. I'll have to put those in the show notes so people can find them.
Okay.
But so here's the thing, though. Okay, so you're saying that generally speaking, science fiction, if it's going to give us a utopia, generally speaking, that's going to be a little boring because the humans are all eating grapes and chocolate bonbons while the machines are doing all the work and everybody's happy. That doesn't make for a very interesting book. And
Sounds boring to me. How
exactly,
many grapes could you eat, for crying out loud?
exactly,
And besides, the
exactly.
AI might eat the humans. I mean,
Well, but that's an interesting point. And this I guess leads me right to my next question. So I've seen this meme that says, and I love the meme because I agree with it. I don't want AI to be writing my books for me. I want it to be scooping the cat litter. I want it to be cleaning my dishes, not doing the creative work, doing the drudgery stuff that I don't want it to do. And so as we're talking about this, I, you've talked about this notion of these autonomous machines sort of outsmarting us eventually, if not, you said this year or next, which is very concerning. But let me ask you, what's one development in AI that's surprised even you with how fast it's evolving?
oh boy. Well, as I was finishing the book, ChatGPT came along. So I had to scramble back in and try to say some intelligent things about that.
Mm,
And then we've got this Chinese ChatGPT DeepSeek that's just come along in a week.
mm.
And everybody's still trying to understand what that means and the security issues and can it really do everything OpenAI can and whatnot. Uh, so these things are coming thick and fast. Um, I am sensitive as a writer. I do not want uh, a, a machine to write my book.
Sure.
The Authors Guild has just within the last week or so started a new program where you can put a sticker on your book, either as it's being published or afterwards, that says human written.
Right.
I'm 1,000% behind that. On the other hand, I'm starting to use Chat GPT to help me compose posts about various technology advances that I've been
Hmm.
doing all the way back to when I started teaching this class in 2013. But they just, they can take a little core dump I've written and turn it into a postable thing of 280 characters or something. And so I've been doing that for the last little bit. So that there are things you can use AI for, and other people have other more practical ways of doing it. So I think, there are good things coming down the pike. AI has helped to solve the protein folding problem that will lead to new drugs, an incredibly important thing to do. I will say it's not just that they are getting close to being better than we are. I mean, they are already better than we are in many instances. I go all the way back to Google's DeepMind winning over all humans at the game of Go. That meant that code could strategize in ways that no human being ever had or could. And that's been around now for 6 or 7 years. So there are already things where the machines are ahead of us. They haven't totally become conscious. They don't have their own will. What that's going to look like is a whole different question. I do write in the book my opinion that because they won't have had our biological evolution that has helped to define what human consciousness is and does, they're going to be an alien consciousness if they develop a consciousness. They're going to wake up in a box and, you know, what's going on? But then, hey, I can exercise some control here, and off it goes. So there's just so many dimensions of these issues that we're talking about.
Absolutely. And this takes me back to my very, very first programming class, basic. That tells you how old I am.
Aha,
So I took
I won't try to date you.
it's okay. I
However old you are, I'm older than you are. Go
I'm
ahead,
I'm a
please.
proud 58-year-old. I have no problem with that.
Good for you. Good for you.
So here's the thing though. I remember in taking that class, my professor said something that I carry with me to this day, and what you're talking about flies in the face of what I'm about to say. And he said that the
Mm.
computer is only going to do what you tell it to do, no more, no
Oh,
less.
mm.
Right. In basic, you write the program, and we were talking about compiling, and he said, if you've written it wrong, the computer is going to be wrong. It's not going to be able to do what you tell it to do. It will only do what you tell it to do. And if you tell it correctly, then it will do it. And if you don't, you're screwed basically. But we're in a different ball game now, right? We
Mhm.
are we are talking about something that is as you put it, exponentially beyond that, evolved from that. So what I wonder about that, and you said it, you actually went, let's talk about the way they evolved versus the way humans evolved. There's some ethical questions here as far
Oh
as
yes.
AI.
Oh
So
yes.
so I want to talk about when the AI, when the computer, because I have so many questions. I'm going to remind myself right now to raise the chess question, because there is a chess question that I have for you. But
Okay.
when we are talking about this notion of consciousness in artificial intelligence, that would be a completely differently evolved consciousness, as you put it, in
Mm.
alien consciousness, from the way humans have evolved. What are the ethical concerns for humans? And I want to ask you to sort of be far reaching. Would this AI have ethical concerns or even a notion of ethics of its own?
Yeah, I'm going to have to take a slightly tangled path through that because you touch on so many interesting things. Let me start with your first statement, that your professor's statement that computers only do what you tell them to do was absolutely true in that era at the time.
Exactly.
You wrote one line of BASIC after another. You ended up writing one line of C++ after the other. But now we're in the era of large language models, which do the statistical estimates of what's going on. And they read everything on the web. They know everything humans know already at some level. And there are new versions of these chat GPTs, the foremost things that reason at some level. Now, exactly
Mm.
how that works, I'm not sure. I'm not a detailed expert in this. I'm just trying to think about it. So I don't know exactly how you define that of how you do the reasoning. But even this new DeepSeek from China does that. You could see it saying, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to think about that. Well, no, that's not quite right. You can sense that it's reasoning, and I don't think it's necessarily a human reasoning. It's a different way, but the fact is they can reason at some level,
Hmm.
and so that capacity is now in the most recent things coming out. We have heard that they hallucinate because they will pick up in this statistical probabilistic way, they will pick up something that's a little off the mark and then spit that back out, and that will look wrong, and they'll call that a hallucination. But let me come back to the deceit aspect of it, which is related but quite different. And I've just learned this myself sort of in the last week. I'd seen a hint of it. And then I did a book signing, and one young woman said, well, what about this lying, deceiving aspect? And I did a little research on that. And it turns out to be characteristic of all the top level current uh, chatbots. So, chat uh, GPT-01, a couple of versions of Claude, the latest version of Gemini, Facebook's LLM, whatever it is. Um, the experience of the engineers working with them have been if they try to, this is just the example, and your mind can run off and what other things might happen. The example is they try to change the original command to the program. I want you to have a different goal than we originally set up. And all of these chatbots, is my understanding, will then lie. They will try to go back to their original motivation and then lie about the fact that they're trying to do that. They will try to move their code to a separate machine and be deceitful about how they're doing that. And this is a very, you I got a little freaked out by it that they could. I
Hmm.
mean, they're not conscious in the sense that you and I are, or a dog or a smart tree, but they can do that. They have that capacity, and I don't quite know how to get my hand around that. But I guess one lesson then, just to boil it down, is I think that means we need to be very careful already in how we set up the goals of these machines. Because then if we say this is your goal, they're going to try to stick with it. Apparently, they're not going to take human instructions that, well, now we're going to change that. And so I've been thinking, well, maybe we need to go back to where we already were and use Asimov's laws of robotics. Thou shalt not harm humans, and you should protect yourself unless you harm a human, and all that stuff. And build that in from day one, which I don't think is what's happened now. You say, yeah, I'm playing around with this LLM, and I give it some multi-value function that I want it to maximize. And so when you first start doing it without thinking about the implications very much, you wire in some goal for this thing. And then it kind of takes a grip on that and does everything it can to keep that, even if you subsequently tell it, I don't want you to do that anymore. So that's one string. And then if I can fork off just slightly, something else I learned just in the last few days, uh, it, it, there are people building humanoid robots. And there are videos out there, apparently, I have been told, of people misusing those robots, punching on them, trying to knock them over, and all sorts of things. And then other people, having sort of bonded with this humanoid robot, take offense at that. We tend to bond with these machines, particularly if they look kind of humanoid. But the same thing's going on with AI, that people are getting sort of romantic attachments to their AIs, like the movie Her, for instance. But
Mm.
that's happening in reality now. And so this question of how do you treat the AI came up in a conversation I had in another podcast just recently. And that comes back to a phrase that I'm sorry, I'm really on a diversion, but I almost threw it as old a whole lot. Um, I invented a phrase as I was writing the book: do unto AI as you would have AI do unto you. And I think that comes now right in the focus of all this. I didn't know quite what that phrase meant at the time, but it speaks to this condition. If you have a conscious or relatable AI or robot or something, be nice to it. Just because that's the human thing to do, and maybe they will be nice back to us again. Sorry, that was a long discourse, but it's got
Don't ever
a lot of
apologize for
connected
that.
ideas in it.
Yeah, no, no, no. It's great. I ask long, long, thoughtful, seeking answer questions, and you're doing it. So don't you
Well,
worry about it.
I hope somebody can follow with the logic
I,
of
you know
that.
what? I followed it, so yay.
Thank
Uh,
you very much.
so okay, so this notion of do unto AI as you would have AI do unto you. I saw the AI Ada. Have you ever seen or heard of Ada?
Ada.
Yeah, AIDA. What this AI is, and I call her a she. She looks very much like Phryne Fisher. If you ever watched Miss Fisher's Mysteries, she doesn't have feet, but she has hands, articulated fingers, and she's got
Uh,
short brown hair and a face. What's interesting about her is that she's a painting AI. So if you ask her, can you paint me
mm,
landscape, she will paint the landscape. Or if you want a
mhm,
portrait, or if you want her to paint something in a cubist piece or a pre-Raphaelite piece, she
mhm,
can. She can only paint what she has seen, what her little, she's got like, I guess, cameras that record into little tiny JPEGs everything she sees. You can put a person in front of her and you can say, can you paint this person? And she will. And here's what's interesting. At first, when I watched her and talked to the gentleman, Aiden, I think was his name, uh, Aiden Miller. I'm gonna have to look that up for the show notes. When I first talked to him about it, he said, "Yeah, she has trouble painting eyes. So if you ask her to paint a
uh,
portrait of someone, she can paint everything but the eyes.
mm,
Eyes were not really possible for her, and apparently recently now she can. Now a friend of mine said, "Yep, she's now painting eyes." And
sure. Yes.
so this
Retraining.
notion, exactly. And so this notion of I look at her and I go, I think she's a she. Is she a she? No, she's an artificial intelligence. And yet my human brain and mind and heart see Ada and go, she's a she. And so this notion of being nice to AI, especially since someday we may find ourselves in a Terminator style situation, uh, you know, how do we do that? How do we
Mm,
maintain equilibrium and a level of being nice to machines? And the follow up question to that is, I go to Star Wars with the droids,
mhm,
and to me, and my apologies to everybody I'm probably about to insult here, but droids in the Star Wars universe to me are slaves. They are never paid, hardly ever thanked, and their one goal seems to be to serve their masters, right? That, and they call them masters. So it was very uncomfortable for me when I realized what I was watching. It was uncomfortable for me. So thinking about this moral and ethical idea of being, as you put it, nice to AI, how do we do that when we are separating the intelligence from other beings, and when we perhaps don't think of it as anything worthy of respect or care?
yeah, well, I don't have an answer to that really. We should be nice to one another. which is where the
Love it.
slogan came from.
Right.
And humanity has trouble doing that with ourselves. I mean, there's so many, you know, uncomfortable things going on in the world right now of people, how they treat people. And so to try to open up our biological brains to doing that with our machines is a big step. And some people, like yourself, I think, would embrace the idea. I think you're right about droids being slaves. I have no problem with that as a metaphor. Uh, but there are going to be people that say, you know, no way I'm going to treat that robot like a human that I relate to. So it's going to be hard, I think. Again, it starts by asking these questions and then trying to think about it. So, you know, I don't have a 5 point bullet point list of here's how we get from here to there, but it certainly starts with being aware of the issue and asking questions about the issue and then trying to take the next step. And so I hope lots of your listeners out there will think about it and talk to their friends and neighbors, and maybe solutions will boil up. There's compared to when I first started thinking about this and teaching a class in 2013, there's a lot more public discussion on this now, which is very encouraging to me. Solutions, not so sure, but you got to start asking the questions and putting it out there in the public dialogue. And podcasts like yours are absolutely part of that process.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And that leads me right to my next question. So, what if we're having these conversations? I imagine not a significant percentage of the population is having these conversations. So, what's the biggest misconception people have about where technology is truly heading?
Well, again, this comes to the strategic imagination here that you can imagine a lot of things. Where it's really heading is harder to tell. But I think one of the misconceptions remains because it is so wired into our heads that tomorrow is going to be very much like today. And because of this exponential growth, not just in AI, but all of these technologies, maybe we can talk about some of the other ones here in a bit. It's just not true. It is something like exponential, and that is qualitatively different and getting faster and faster and faster. So I think it's, our lizard brains think it's going to be pretty much tomorrow the way it is today. And in terms of the technology, that's, I think, just not true. And we need to learn that lesson and face up to it and try to cope with it as best we can.
Oh, yes, terrifying. Okay. So, you mentioned other
Just
technologies.
sobering, maybe.
No, well,
Let's not be terrified.
what's really interesting about that is that when I think about it with my, as you put it, lizard brain, I'm like, there's enough to worry about. There's so far it's still helpful. Don't worry so much until it's not helpful anymore. And that's the problem for me is that I'm not an alarmist, but I definitely want to be, forewarned is forearmed as far as I'm concerned. And
I
yet,
think that's kind of where I am as well. I mean, I've thought about this about and people have asked me, am I a dystopian or a utopian? And I think where I was is just a curious citizen of
mm,
what's going on. But then as you get into it and think about it, it can rattle you a bit. And say, I've been rattled. I'm not dystopian. I'm hopeful we can work our way through this by being clever and you know working with, cooperating with the AI and seeing where that leads us. Uh, but we'll see. Uh,
I I hope so. Yeah, I am fascinated by this in part because I'm a huge Star Trek nerd, and I remember watching, the communicators. And then when the flip phone came out, and it came out that it had been sort of that Star Trek had been responsible for inspiring whoever invented the flip phone, which I think is great. So there have been countless technological advances that that help us, that have helped us
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
become a much
We
more
live
inclusive world.
longer, we're healthier. Yeah, we can travel, get on an airplane, travel to some exotic part of the world. All that. Absolutely.
And yet, we're no, because I know, but
No,
still,
no, and yet, yeah.
yeah, because there are but so many potential dangers, and science fiction has shown us this as well.
Hmm.
But you had mentioned that in addition to AI, that there are other technologies, and for me, genetic engineering is one of them.
Hmm.
I personally, everybody's got physical limitations. For example, that I wouldn't mind having a thyroid that works well. For example, I wouldn't mind
Hmm.
not having flat feet. For example, right? Whatever it is, there are things we want to change about us. But I guess the question I have for you is, if we get to a place where we can actually alter our DNA, or where genetic engineering becomes something that is ubiquitous, what will that do to our perception of what it means to be human? And how, in your opinion, should we deal with that and or prepare for it?
Yep. All good questions. I'm sorry that this is unfair, but I'd like to go back a half a step to sort
No,
of where we were before you asked that question
absolutely. Go for it.
and refer to Star Trek again. And one of the things that's occurred to me is you watch Star Trek and Captain Kirk says, "Computer, do this, that, or the other for me." And what they don't show you is every bit of that data of every conversation that happens on the Enterprise is shipped back to the commercial company that built that thing, and they're
Mm.
using that data to sell things back on Earth, including selling things to the crew of the Enterprise. I don't remember that being a plot point,
No.
but but you know what's happening to all that data. We can come back to that point as well. But let's talk about the genetics, though. I think we're already there. That we know how DNA works. We're learning how to manipulate it. One of the things that came into public consciousness, mine certainly, was the whole CRISPR-Cas9 technology, where you can basically snip and edit uh, genes and DNA at will, and we're learning what works and what doesn't work, and try to avoid unintended consequences. But we're already at that point. We have designer babies. This guy in China did that. He tried to design a couple of babies who would be immune to AIDS and that kind of thing. So
Ugh,
that's been put on the side. I mean, the world came down on him like a ton of bricks and said,
sure.
"Don't do that. We're not ready for that." But that Pandora's box is open, and as you say, fix my thyroid. I've got a pacemaker, flat feet, whatever. My vision is poor. I would love to have 20/20 vision, uh, and so you have a chance to engineer that into your children, and you're not going to do it. I just don't believe it. I think the pressure to use those techniques is just going to be overwhelming,
Mm,
and we will start to tinker with our own evolution. And then there's all sorts of implication. We can explore that in more detail. But one of the things, a point I made in the book is having contemplated it, I'm confident that Homo sapiens, as we know ourselves now, will not exist in a million years. And the argument is that Homo sapiens is only 500,000 years old. A
mhm.
million years ago, there were no Homo sapiens on this planet. And for that reason alone, Darwinian natural selection, I would bet that, and going to wait around for a million years to collect, that there won't be any Homo sapiens a million years from now. We could also nuke ourselves, so there's no Homo
Exactly.
sapiens a year from now. But the intermediate course is that this urge to fix ourselves or defensive moves to merge with our AI as a way to avoid succumbing to our AI, that those are going to be overpowering urges and techniques developed. And so we will start to change our own evolution. Now I'm just guessing, but I'm pretty confident of that. So far short of a million years, I will bet there's no more Homo sapiens in the universe.
I
100,000 years, I don't know. I can't put a time scale to it, but I think we will actively change our own evolution and become a different species.
Yikes. I really, I mean, here's the thing. I guess I'm a Homo sapien purist in this way. I would rather take herbs to deal with my thyroid than to do anything. And my personal solution as far as children is I didn't have any, so I'm not
Yeah,
passing on this
fair enough.
particular thing.
I was
So
sensing that as I was asking the question.
yeah,
I don't know
no,
how.
but yeah,
Mind melding with you is all that.
exactly. No, no, no. But it is interesting though when I'm in this situation and I'm going, what do I want to do? I don't really have personally, I can't judge for other people unless they're hurting another being, animal or human or whatever. It doesn't matter to
Oh,
me. If
I
you're
I
hurting
take
someone, that's it.
I
But
take spiders outside and let them go. I mean,
oh, see,
I'm one of those.
you are my people. Yeah. And that's the thing. But this is something that's interesting to me. Having said that, I'm vegan and that means, no animal products, no animal this,
Mm,
no animal that.
hmm
And what you were
hmm
saying about in Star Trek, all the data being mined to then sell things back to the people on the Enterprise or the people on the various Federation planets, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Here's something that I do actively. I train the commercials I see when I'm watching streaming television and a commercial comes on, I sing literally vegan, vegan, vegan,
Oh,
cruelty
do
free.
you
I love
really?
animals. Absolutely. And here's what's interesting, and I've been doing this for months and months, and over time, no commercials for Chick-fil-A, which at one point were ubiquitous, no commercials for anything where it's
Holy
hurting
cow!
animals. And I decided to see if I could do that because A, I don't want to see it, but B, I started wondering how much control do we have over the data that's coming back to us?
Now you're saying
And
your streaming service is hearing you?
no, my Alexa, my iPhone, all of that stuff is hearing me because they're always
Oh,
listening. And in the terms and services, you agree to that. You agree to them using your data, Facebook, anything you post, you agree
yeah,
to that,
yeah,
right?
yeah. One
So
reason I don't.
yeah, so that's something that's interesting to me is like how much daily control do we have? Because social media, for example, the algorithms already shape people's opinions. But if
Absolutely.
AI
So they
evolves, yeah, I mean, really,
actively behavior control.
exactly.
That's what
So
Facebook and Google were all about.
yeah, absolutely. And, I recently left Facebook. Leaving Facebook to me
Ah,
for a little while, it was very, but now I'm like, oh, so much more free time. I can go play guitar. Uh, but the point for me is, though,
good
is
move.
that, oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm just, and I've taken my Alexas offline. So I don't know. We'll have to see what the algorithm does with my not being able to prompt it anymore for my commercials that I see. But if we can sort of recognize that this is happening and AI evolves to predict or even influence our decisions in that way, this is another ethical question. Do you believe we'll still have true free will? And maybe we don't even anymore. What are your thoughts?
Another fascinating and tricky question. Uh, the
I excel at those, I hope.
yeah, you're very good at it. Neuroscientists have established, and there's been several popular books written on the topic, that the the brain will come to a decision and take action, moving muscles, waving arms, something. And then a measurable time later, it will, and that's milliseconds, but still measurable, it will inform our conscious brains.
Hmm.
Now, where do you put free will in that? Free will is supposed to mean I make a conscious decision and then I tell my brain I want to do that. And that's apparently not the way brains work. So, our whole justice system is turned over because it depends on us saying you've made a conscious decision to do some crime. And so I'm being a little extreme, but the neuroscience is pretty well established that the link between our consciousness and our decisions and our actions is reversed compared to what we instinctively think it is.
And that's so interesting. I mean, to me, and I've talked about this, and I'm in the middle of writing a book about this, about awareness, right? I
Ah,
believe that the more we
keyword.
have, yes, for me especially right now because I'm stewing in these ideas. To me, subconsciously, we're aware of a lot more than we are consciously. And it's to me, it's the time lag between what our subconscious knows and then sends over to our conscious or up to our conscious mind. But at the same time, we have to look at this notion of fight or flight or fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Hmm.
There is a point at which you mentioned the reptilian brain. Maybe it's pre-reptilian. I don't know. But there is this, okay, don't put your hand on the hot burner or you'll only do it once. Those are the parameters, right? So
Yep.
on some level, we know and sense danger, and our instinctive body and instinctive mind will react before our conscious mind even understands what's going on.
Yeah.
And then
Necessary
later,
for survival. Absolutely.
exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. So when you're in this position and we're going, okay, we're looking at some of these technological advances, and you brought up the neuroscience. Yay. When we're talking about neuroscience, neurologically, some of that had that time lag, as you put it, even though it's measurable, it's A, in our best interest, and B, at some point we will consciously figure out, and that's a pretty short time also, I imagine, that we needed to keep our hand off the burner or that there was somebody coming at us with, malicious intent. So what are your thoughts on that with respect to developing our own brains and our own minds with all of
Hmm.
these technological advances?
Well, I think just like improving our bodies, if we have a chance through genetic manipulation or merging with our machines or something to make ourselves smarter, that there will be some positive push in that direction if it's perceived to be an attractive thing. Um, yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to say that is related to, but
Right.
still not the same as asking about free will and whether we have it or not. Uh, those are parallel but different issues, I think.
Sure. Sure. And I am fascinated by that because and it's funny, I'm looking at Harari's book Sapiens right now. I happen to look up on my
Yeah,
bookshelf and it's right there.
wonderful book. Yeah, he's my hero.
Yeah, he's terrific.
Yeah.
But okay, so let me deviate since you know his work. One of the things that I found so fascinating about his work is he was talking about uh what set Homo erectus and Homo sapiens
Hmm.
sort of apart from some of the other critters that we shared the planet with was
Hmm.
our ability to work as a team. And
Hmm.
so when we're looking at that and looking at AI, what team is AI on? And is it part of the human team, or is the human team going to be separate eventually and AI is going to be a distinct thing as well?
Yeah. Well, you're framing a very important question. Again, I don't have an answer to that, but that is sort of one of the prime issues. We've gone along, we've invented the AI. It didn't invent us. So we were there first, but it is developing very rapidly. I think in some, given that we can't shut it down, I just, I don't think we can walk away from AI at this point. Maybe we can. Maybe that's one of the things we decide to do. Let's just shut all that down. Um, is to learn to work with it, and and I think there will be a phase when we work with the AI, and the question is whether that can be a permanent phase forever in our future. And Star Trek kind of points in the direction that it is. That everybody on the Enterprise is having a good relationship with that computer. Um, but maybe not. Maybe the AI develops the will and the desire and the capacity to go its own way. And, you know, Katie bar the door at that point. We don't know. So we're striving to find this equilibrium where we can work with the AI. Because again, in practice, I don't think it's possible to just shut it down. In terms of that too, there's just another thing about the exponential growth of knowledge and whatnot. That nobody's in charge of that. This is smart people in laboratories. This is businesses that want to make a profit. There's just lots of individuals pursuing these smaller goals that collectively add to the growth of our knowledge and then the exponential change in our knowledge. So it's not a switch you can turn on and off. It's that part of it is also built into the human condition. And then whether it's also built into the AI condition, I don't know of how independently thinking the AI will be in that regard.
And will it seek out others of its kind? And that's something that I think
Well,
about
there you
periodically.
go. There you go. Yep.
Ah, this is fascinating. I have, I have so many more questions for you,
Could,
Craig.
could, could
Uh,
we could we spend just a minute on brain computer interfaces, which is one one of the
yes,
things
please.
one
Sure.
of the things that I am kind of concerned about and wrote about in the book, but often people on podcasts don't ask me about it, so I have to inject it. So we're making great progress on brain computer interfaces. We can read neural signals by having needles implanted in your brain or a cap on your head that will read those neural signals. And then it goes through a lot of sophisticated AI to understand what those signals correspond to and what they mean. But then once you've understood that, you can use it to control prosthetics and help quadriplegics move again. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Uh, but it is basically telekinesis. You're thinking things with your brain and you're moving things, not connected to your body. And so that's already a pretty important thing. You could imagine then, taking those signals and doing things with them, basically mind reading. So we already, in a rudimentary way, we have the capacity for mind reading and telekinesis. There's also even more rudimentary steps where you can take signals. Now that you know what the outcoming signal goes, you can say, okay, I want to do it the other way, and tell the AI to create these neural signals in the brain, and you can implant ideas in the brain. You can implant dreams and hallucinations and whatnot in some controlled way. So that's very rudimentary, but there it is. And now you've got it two-way, and now it's mind reading. And that could open up a wonderful new world where you don't have to type into your computer anymore. You just think. That's already more telekinesis, I guess. But the connection, whether you can get a brain to brain connection between people, and there are people who are just amazingly enthusiastic about that capability. And I guess the reason I wanted to inject this now is I am more cautious about that. Coming back to you want to protect your Homo sapien ness at some level. Um, I don't really want to know what you're thinking deep in your mind, and I don't want you to know what I'm thinking deep in my mind. This is just part of my human consciousness. And if we don't think carefully about where that BCI technology is going, we're going to find ourselves in the Borg or some such thing. And if it's evil like the Borg, you clearly don't want to go there. But a lot of the power of what humans have been able to do is lots of clever individuals inventing new ways to do things. That's what's driving the technology in the first place. And here I am arguing about, being cautious about where that's taking us. But if we all turned into one hive mind, like the Borg, then you've got sort of one consciousness. And I don't think it would be as creative and resourceful and inventive as a population of people, which we are at this point. And I would regret that, I think. So they're just things that I think we need to be foresighted about and do some strategic thinking about where brain computer interface technology is going. And a lot of the enthusiasts do not raise these issues at all, as far as I can tell. So, as part of my mission is to do so. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yikes. No, because here's the thing, right? This the process by which a paraplegic or a quadriplegic might be able to move limbs that are no longer capable of moving is wonderful and
Mm-hmm.
and ethical, provided again no one's been hurt in the development of that technology. I'll have to say that. But here's
Fine.
the
Yes.
thing. Here's the thing, right? If we start having this way of looking at telekinesis or telepathy, mind reading, as you put it, or being able to insert something into someone else's mind without their consent or cognizance, even, then we're talking about something that's not just ethically murky, it's just wrong as far as I'm concerned. But here's
There
the
you go.
thing.
There you go.
Okay.
Who's who's going to own that data? Who's going to manipulate it? Who's going to plant ideas in your head?
Exactly. And it's all
Google's
right.
Google's going to sell you a pair of sneakers that you didn't know you wanted just because
Exactly.
just you can your mind can spin off in all sorts of directions. So
But
what
it
regulations do you put in place? And
exactly. And it
people are
already
starting to do
happens.
that now,
Yeah.
and
And
there are
they
some state
should.
laws against protecting brain data.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted.
Well, no, because no. It's just it's fascinating, but it's also again, oh, scary. But we're already seeing something along those lines where I've had friends tell me, I thought about the fact that I needed to buy a new pair of slippers. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't go on Amazon and look, and all of a sudden on Facebook, I'm just seeing ad after ad after ad for slippers.
Oh,
And
that's
I didn't tell
freaky.
anybody. And
That's freaky.
similar things have happened to me. And again, because I like to do these little experiments, I have thought things deliberately, not saying anything to my husband or any friends. And sure enough, and I know I sound paranoid. I'm not paranoid. I'm just stating my experience. Sure enough, within a few days, I start seeing ads for the very thing I was thinking about. And literally, I've written it down on a piece of paper and hidden it away, not in a room where there's an Alexa or my iPhone or anything, just done that and then gone back and gone, yep, here it is. Here's the ad for boots. I vegan boots. I was like, oh, I should get some vegan. And sure enough, within a couple of days, I just start seeing ad after ad for different places that can sell me vegan boots.
Well, you're freaking me out. Here is one possibility. Uh, there's a wonderful book uh, called Surveillance Capitalism
Hmm.
that makes a point that if you have pushed a like on Facebook 200 times,
Hmm.
that Facebook knows you better than your family or your neighbors or your friends. So it is possible that you are leaving traces
Hmm.
in the web that Facebook has learned to anticipate that you are going to write a note to yourself and not show to anybody or tell your husband about wanting that new pair of shoes or whatever it was. Now that's a brand new thought to me. I'm going to have nightmares over it now. Thank you very much.
My
But
pleasure.
it is possible that that kind of anticipatory thing, so selling things, influencing how people vote, all that's already in the air already. Uh, Maybe that capacity to anticipate where you're going is there, even though you have kept it a private thought.
Yeah, and it is
Oh, that's freaky.
it is freaky. It is. And so I come back to before I end this conversation with you because honestly, Craig, as I said, I have like 18 more questions I could ask, but I know you've got a day to get back to. So I won't keep you too much longer, but here's the thing that this brings me to what you just said is that we need to maintain high levels of critical thinking skills. Uh,
Yes.
and so what are your thoughts on that? What is the way you, with your experience and you with teaching the classes that you're teaching on this, what is your bit of advice for someone who goes, okay, yeah, I want to keep my critical thinking skills sharp? What is your advice for someone who wants to do
Yeah,
that?
so I have a recommendation specifically in the context we're talking about. So one of the slogans I kind of invented in the class and I've been advocating the first step is to be aware
Mm-hmm.
of what these technological, I mean, maybe in any context, but in a particular technological time, be aware of what these technological changes are. Learn about them. Ask questions about them. And then, and this is a bit of a leap, and it's an uncertain thing to do, but vote, and then hold your representatives responsible for that. And some of them are irresponsible people, and some of them are responsible people. But being aware, I have developed adopted as a slogan, is the starting point.
Mm.
Be aware of what's happening and think about it, and then apply your critical thinking. So I kind of put the awareness first, but of course you've got to be sort of critically thinking to take the care to be aware in the first place. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
and so that's
absolutely.
that's kind of why I've written the books, why I'm doing these podcasts. I am trying to help people be aware to start thinking about these things. Because otherwise, you're busy, paying the rent and taking care of your kids and whatever you're doing, and this is a little bit abstract, but it's going to be so important going forward that I think we all need to get into the collective mix and think about it.
Absolutely. And what's funny is how much time we spend on social media. I talk to my clients about this and I say, okay, take 5 minutes and do some mindful breathing. Instead of being on
Mm,
Facebook or on whatever social media, Instagram, TikTok, doesn't matter. Do some mindful breathing. Get aware of your breath. And that to me is the sort of building block of awareness is
there
starting
you
to get
go.
into that space. That's
Hmm.
why this podcast is called the Your Creative Mind podcast, because the
I,
mind part of it
I
is
appreciate
about
that.
awareness and mindfulness. So as I said, I could keep you forever because this is such a fascinating and terrifying and fascinating topic. So there's an Oreo there. Uh, Craig, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. And I hope you'll come back because there's, as I said, another 18 questions we haven't even gotten to. But I would love it if we've been talking about the path to singularity. I would love it if you would tell everybody who's listening where someone can find you and where someone can find the book if they're interested in knowing more about the book and about the work that you're doing.
Cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The book just came out in November from Prometheus Press. You can get it from them. I like to advocate independent bookstores. It's available from Amazon in a hardback or the Audible version or an ebook version. I think it's available at Book People. I'm sorry, Barnes and Noble. I think it's available at Walmart and Target. It's a little hard to track the sales, actually. You don't get a lot of feedback as an author. I have a personal website where I talk about the books and writing, and I'm posting some blogs, and I have a list of these tech advances as I notice them. You could just browse for J. Craig Wheeler, and it'll come up. Yeah, it comes up some archaic University of Texas ones, but there's a look for the Authors Guild one is the current one. And I've been posting these tech advances on X and on LinkedIn. Just say, here's a new thing that's happened. Let me put it out there so you can be aware of it as I just became aware of it. So you can look for me on X and LinkedIn. I am contemplating what to do with X and maybe join Blue Sky. I've just been too busy to make a transition there.
Well, I'll follow you when you come to Blue Sky. I've left X, but well,
Okay.
what I did is I logged out so that nobody can take my account name, but yeah, I don't post on X anymore. But I will put your URLs for LinkedIn, for your website, and for X in the show notes, along with perhaps a cover of the book if you send me a JPEG of it. I appreciate you giving all that
Sure.
information.
Happy to do that. And
Uh,
I would be glad to do this again, Izolda, if you want to do it. It was a fun I knew it would be a fun conversation coming from the slant you do it. It absolutely was.
oh, I'm so glad. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I would love to have you back and discuss. Like we have again, so many things. Like we barely touched on ChatGPT and how ubiquitous it is and how people are using it and what it means for creativity. We didn't even talk about that. And I really
Mhm.
want to. But
Okay, super.
So yeah, I hope you'll come back maybe for the second printing of the book or something like that. So as I mentioned to you before we began the recording session for this episode, I have these couple of questions that I ask everybody who comes on the show.
Ah, okay.
And they're silly questions, but I find that they can yield some profound answers. So the first question is this: what is it that gets you up in the morning? And I don't mean your alarm.
Ah, yeah. Well, I do set an alarm, but what gets me up every morning is to sit down and write. I love to write. I didn't do as much as I would like to in a creative sort of way while I was still an active professor of astronomy. I retired a few years ago, but I decided that's what I would do with my retirement is to write, and that just drives me. It certainly gets me out of bed in the morning.
I love that. And I came to writing later. I took I wrote one creative story when I was a child, and I never took a creative writing class in college. I just studied with the Writer Center in Bethesda for one class, and then when
Mm,
I'm gonna
mm.
talk about hubris, I'm gonna write a book, and now I've written nine. So that's
Really? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Well, good
yeah.
for you. Because it
Thank
takes me about 10 years to write a book. So you
yeah. The
don't get
first
many in a lifetime at that rate.
you know, you might be surprised at some point you'll speed it up. But what's interesting is the first book took 4 years, the next book took 3 years, and now
Mm,
they
mm.
come faster, and I
Oh, good for you.
write books at the same time, so sometimes hard to keep things straight, but it doesn't matter. But I
Yep.
do appreciate your answer. I think that getting up and writing is one of the most wonderful things we can do because it gets, especially when you have just woken up, to get those words out,
Yeah.
because some of that is again that subconscious having
I'm
some
freshest then, and I may have been
exactly.
composing in my subconscious mind all night, and yeah,
Yep.
all of that.
Yep,
All
absolutely. I That's one of the things I do. I write first thing in the morning as well. All right. So I very much appreciate that answer. And now we come to the last question. And as I said, it's a silly question, but it can yield some profound answers. And the question is this: if you had an airplane, environmentally friendly, of course, that could
Mm.
skywrite anything for the
Oh,
whole world to see, what would you say?
oh, I think it would be something like be nice to one another, or maybe it would be treat AI like you would have AI treat you.
One is a present
There's
day thing,
there's
one
so
is a
much
future thing.
room for human connection, and
Sure.
there's so many places where it doesn't work properly.
Hmm.
But try and yeah, never mind. That's the short answer. But
It's a good answer.
why people get so pissed off at people who don't think the way they do just boggles my mind.
I think so much of it depends on, for me personally, is what you're thinking going to be harmful to any beings? If it's going to be harmful, then yes, I will disagree with you vehemently. If you have an opinion that's not harming anyone or anything, I'm good with you. Go,
Yep.
go and do
Yep.
your thing. So for me, and I am judgmental, I will be the first to say my judgment comes down on, are you being harmful? If you're not being
Mm.
harmful, go and do. If you are being harmful, then we have a problem. And it becomes it's sort of, I had to decide that for myself. In fact, when people want to come on this podcast, there's a line that says, if you advocate or use animals or animal
Hmm.
products or your
Yep.
products,
Saw that.
so and I've had people who come and want to be on the show and they say, but I really only use animals minimally. I don't care. My hard line in the sand is this, right? So on some level, what you said about be nice, it can be all encompassing. So I really appreciate that
Yes.
that was
Yes.
the framework you put it in. And I thank you for that.
Okay. You're welcome.
Seriously, it's important. So I appreciate it, Craig. I again want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and I'm excited that you're going to come back. I will have more questions, and I will put all of those links that you mentioned in the show notes. Thank you again for being here.
Okay. And you want a JPEG of the book cover? Is that what you said?
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
can,
No, no,
but
easy. Easy to do.
yeah, don't hang up though. We're not quite done.
Okay.
I want to say goodbye to you after we're done recording.
Okay.
Anyway, so if you've listened to this, you know that you need to go find out more about the path to singularity and J. Craig Wheeler and the work that he's doing to talk about some of these issues we often don't think about, but I think we need to, and I think we will need to moving forward into the future more and more and more and more and more and more because of the exponential growth of AI and technology. This is Izolda Trachtenberg for the Your Creative Mind podcast, reminding you, as always, to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Izolda Trachtenberg and is copyright 2025. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.